Hello and welcome back to our watercolor tutorials. Today we're going to paint some lovely lilacs, and to start with, as always, we're going to map out roughly where we want our flowers to go. We're going to use a little vase as if we just picked the flowers. We're going to do this in the lower half of the page and then roughly like a little jar. I'm just going to roughly outline it, doesn't need to be perfect. And then from here, we're gonna draw some stems. Always try and do an uneven number of stems to make sure that you have a nice composition. It just helps with balancing out the composition, and it looks a bit less, it just looks more natural. Now after this, grab your brush. I'm going to use, as always, my trusted number 6, if I can find it. There we go. And lilacs are quite nice and forgiving to paint because it's a lot of just dabbing. It's very similar to what we could do for lavender as well. And it's mainly about leaving enough space for it to feel natural. So what we're doing, we're going to use, and you don't need to have any lilac color. Purple is maybe not something that you will have in your original palette if you buy preset ones. However, you could just mix it with some pinks and some blues and you can try around. We also want some diversity in terms of colors, so don't be shy and just try. I have a couple of lilacs in my palette and I'm gonna try and use these. I generally don't paint with lilac a lot or with purple a lot. So I'm not as familiar with it, but let's see how it goes. We can learn this together. Heavier on the cold side, which means it just has more blue. If you want, you can always go back to the color wheel to see how to mix the different colors. And then we're just going to start dabbing. If you're wondering why this paper looks different than before, at least the composition, it's because I by mistake grabbed the wrong paper and it doesn't absorb as well and doesn't give the nice effect. So I quickly changed to a different paper. I'm actually going to take my number 2 size brush and we're starting over. So taking this one over here, eventually you will see that given they overlap, you won't see everything of each of the flowers, but that's okay, we'll get there. I'm just going to start dabbing my brush. And it's okay that it will blend in from time to time. So that doesn't matter. Like, we want it to be somewhat translucent. That's a black. Maybe not as much of that. We could go even more loose. Just make sure you have some space in between. And the more we go downwards, the wider the flower gets. Also, the closer I get to the bottom, in theory, the darker it will be, most likely. I'm gonna stop right here, let this dry slightly, and then I'm gonna move over to the next one, which maybe we will start. Let me just mix a bit of similar tone. We start all the way to the right. Right here. Maybe this one is hanging down slightly, giving it an organic shape. Just remember keeping some space in between. Which we later on can fill in with a little bit of stem and leaves to make sure that it looks as natural as possible. Also, it gives a little bit of dimension. Just paint it. That's okay. And also the leaves will get a bit bigger on the bottom. Here, it's worth it. To allow for some bleeding. Okay. Now, while this one dries a bit further, we're going to take a small brush, maybe a 000, and we're going to go in. So the lilacs have a rather woody stem, so we're actually going to go in with some brown and just do very fine lines. We can follow the pencil lines just for guidance, but don't, make sure you don't fully paint, just to fill in some of the in-betweens, and then also to the left and right. So this gives the illusion. There we go. It's okay if it blends a bit. It makes it feel a bit softer, a little more natural. I'm gonna go in with some little green. So we can further down the stems. And we take a bigger brush, number 6, and we fill in some of the gaps already with leaves. So the leaves of the lilacs tend to be not too big, and given that we will have some overlaps, it's nice to add leaves now so that you get the illusion that some flowers are closer versus basically there's an overlap in flowers. It gives dimension. So we use our compound stroke as always. You can also play around with some of the green tones you have in your palette. I'm going to go for something slightly darker now. Maybe add some smaller ones right here. And maybe another one right there. Now that this one here has dried a little, we can go in and do the same as we did for the first one. So we take a little brown and then the stem. Between the gaps a little. we do the same thing here. We add a little bit of leaves before we start going into our next little maybe we add one leaf that hangs right over the glass right here. Going back to our lilacs. We're overlapping, so this is seemingly in front of this one, but we have space. Now we're gonna go over to this one here, because this is the one that is gonna be less visible out of all of the lilacs, as it's gonna go fade or position behind this one. And then once we've painted this, we can go in here and do the stems. So we follow the exact same process. And again, this one is a little bit tilted. Also here we could give the illusion that it's hanging slightly over the glass. And there we go. Now we go back with our small brush, adding the little stems here. We're not gonna go up below our glass. We can do the same here, because we want to have the illusion later on of the stems fading with the glass within the water. So we're not going to do solid lines going below the point of the glass. Now we're going to add the last one of our lilacs. This one we might maybe do a little more translucent, because we give the impression of it being further away. We'll do the same later on. when it comes to painting the leaves. We will fill in the gaps later on, but essentially with like this one, that seems like it's a bit further away. Something else you can play with when it comes to perspective is the more, here is less valid because we're talking about an object that is still rather close to you, but if you're looking at the distance, there's an effect that whatever you see becomes more blue. So if you add blue, it will have the effect or create the illusion that it is actually further away. And there we go. Now we can add in some leaves. We make these extra translucent with a lot of water so that they seem further away. And then maybe here we add one more. That is slightly closer. Now, right here we have a lot of empty space. So what we can do is fill in the space, giving the illusion again that it's a bit more layered. And there's maybe more lilacs than we can actually see. There we go. Now we add again our little stems in. And remember, don't go over the line. And here we go. Now for the water, we're gonna use a grayish blue. If you don't have that in your palette, you can do that by mixing your blues with browns or burnt sienna essentially, but browns, reddish, just to get, not red, but blue with a tiny bit of a brownish color because it will gray out the blue. And what we'll do is we'll start with the outline, just subtle outlines. And you can also, if you would like, pencil out the vase first, if that helps you and maybe gives you a bit more confidence. I'm just going to do the outlines with the brush roughly. And then take it from here. So what we're doing is going to do some darker spots and then on the outlines, especially, there we go. And then with the dry brush, we can put it drag it along. It's essentially, you don't need to, if you want to, you can obviously color in the entire vase, but I like to keep it not fully covered, just to avoid that it looks like a solid vase, but rather looks like glass. And there we go. What we can do with a smaller brush now is tab in a bit of brown where the stems are, and not do solid lines, but rather just tab it along, and it will bleed slightly, so it will give the illusion of fading inside the, well, not fading, but basically the light with the water breaking. So it looks like the stems are actually inside water. And there we go, maybe a bit more down here. And this one we missed, so we're gonna take one there too. And here we have it. You can now leave it to dry and add maybe some more detail if you would like, but actually I'm quite happy with the loose formation of all of the leaves. But if you wanted to, you could add more detail once it's fully dry, and you do the wet on dry technique for some more crisp lines, either around the different petals of the leaves, or what you could do as well is take the glue and create some lowlights with the vase, especially on the bottom where you often have the vase is breaking, the outlines. Right here. Maybe this is more like a jar. At the jar, you tend to have the screw top, so that has a little more breakage in terms of color, light, and you can also show that on top. And there we go. These are our finished lilacs. I hope you enjoyed today's tutorial, and I'll see you next week.